Hi there, I'm Todd Fisher. I'm brother of Carrie Fisher, or Princess Leia, or son of Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher, or godson to Mike Todd and Elizabeth Taylor. But I became a big fan of Mike Todd's later in my life because of my interest in cameras. And when I was a young boy, I was on the set of several movies, and one of my favorites that I remember, I was still pretty young, but I remember it well, was the movie called How the West Was Won. And I spent quite a bit of time on various locations watching this camera, this very camera, being moved around in a very difficult fashion. It's very, very heavy. Now, all of this Mike Todd was loosely involved with. He was a shareholder and interested in the whole cinema process, but he wanted to really improve on it. Now, he's not really a techie, but he is a guy that inspires people and finds people. And he went to a company called American Optical, and I'm partnered with them. He partnered with Eastman Kodak to create a 65 millimeter film process. And this is a fearless camera, and this lens was made by American Optical. And so you're looking at the quintessential Todd-AO first camera that was used to film around the world in 80 days. Now, this camera was beyond innovative at the time. It didn't have quite the same field of view, just slightly narrowed 120 degrees, but you could see with that lens, it's off the charts. I mean, it's beautiful images. And once again, big, heavy camera, difficulty working with it. And then, of course, the movie theaters didn't have to retrofit the entire theater chain with triple banks of projectors synchronized and all of this. So very complicated process was basically rendered obsolete by this process that Mike Todd innovated, and it was called Todd-AO. You know, when he got into filmmaking, everybody was like, well, what do you know about filmmaking? Well, as he walks away with the Oscar for Best Picture for Around the World in 80 Days, that's what he knows about filmmaking. So he was quite the showman, quite the guy. My dad and he were thick as thieves. They had a bromance. They didn't know what that meant back then, but they were really close. So over the years, we found some great things, but there's nothing in the collection more important than this. The Todd-AO camera and the Todd-AO lens, which is what shot Around the World in 80 Days, is by far the most important piece in our collection at this point. One of my favorites, obviously, because of Mike Todd's involvement and the idea that basically a civilian without a technical background could be instrumental in putting together a team to build up this system, to make this system, to replace the Cinerama camera system and make a best picture out of the deal. And visually, the movie is fantastic. As many of you know, Todd-AO lenses have become legendary, and people collect a lot of Todd-AO lenses, and their anamorphic lenses and everything are very sought after. But this is the beginning of it all. Okay, this is my good friend Roy Wagner, who's agreed to come talk about cameras and lenses with us. And he was instrumental in me finding a lot of the things that I have found, as I mentioned. It turned out that we had the same mentor, Harry Stradling Sr., who spent a lot of time, more time with Roy, I'm sure, than me. And he was also apparently, and I haven't seen this footage, but he was the guy that apparently did some camera tests with this lens.
So Harry shot the original test for the Todd-AO camera. You know, he was easy to get along with. He loved to teach. And I never saw him ever get mad. He was just a remarkable person.
Yeah, I mean, and the guy's list of accomplishments are kind of off the charts. But it's interesting they had him just for a camera test.
A few Academy Awards.
Just a few. It's nice to have a few, but classy guy too, right? Like it's a whole era that's kind of, I don't know, it went away. Another thing that happened at this era was the camera companies and the lens companies, when this was such a huge success, I mean, everybody scrambled, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And then every studio wanted to come out with their own widescreen process. You know, Paramount had VistaVision, CinemaScope was Fox, and all the rest. So everybody wanted their big widescreen movies. And but then it's not practical to have these giant-ass cameras, so they started to figure out ways to make this a little smaller. So I have an example, though, of it. This is a Todd-AO lens from later on, made by Bosch alone.
Yeah, this is not much bigger than a B&C lens for a 35 millimeter. And a lot of the cinematographers were concerned about that lens because it distorted on the edges. And so you had to be very careful how you framed the actors and how close you could get on them. But with these lenses, you could get as close as you wanted. And it was pretty remarkable.
How long did it take to get from that to that?
About from Around the World in 80 Days to South Pacific. And I think maybe towards the end of Around the World 80 Days, they were having so many trouble.
And Oklahoma was early too, right?
Incidentally, Oklahoma, they used this lens in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Because it seems so impractical,
It's incredibly difficult. I always thought the Nikon fisheye was a huge lens.
Now, the Nikon fisheye lens, as you know, it has a secondary life, which is its HAL 9000 in 2001 Space Odyssey. And I always felt that was an important piece of lens trivia. But as far as lenses is concerned, though, and I think you would agree, this is the holy grail of lenses. And in fact, I like to tell the story that if we were shooting a scene with Jesus and he had the holy grail, it would not be a chalice, it would be he'd have this lens with him. That's how filmmakers and collectors think about this lens.
It's so insane that Mike Todd would do this, because when this was built, if you did any kind of computer rendering, it took you weeks.
Right.
This, as you said, was 120 wide. This was 145 wide. But they were able to, at the University of Rochester in their optics department, they were able to design this. And the one thing about Mike Todd, he never admitted that he knew everything.
Well, that's a smart move. But he found people that did.
Yes, and Dr. O'Brien, he hired, and American Optics he hired, to help him find his way. And then, to cut corners and save costs, initially they told Mike to go with the Captain Jack Fearless camera, which sounds rather funny, but they were great cameras. You could shoot anything from 16 to 35 to 70 millimeter, and nobody was using them. And so he started with those cameras.
I noticed on the side here, though, it says American Optical, Todd Optical Corporation, and then American Optical, both. So it's obviously some kind of partnership that they
was.
had. I know that he spent a fortune on it.
He did. Before he got to that point, he did spend a fortune. Today, to build that lens would still be difficult to get it correct. But in those days, in the 1950s, early 1950s, that was insanely impossible.
Well, I know they went this big because in their mind they had to cover that wide field of view. Right. So it was overkill. Because the problem with the Bosch Alone CinemaScope lenses, they have all kinds of pin cushioning and weird all sorts of drop off and strange problems. Whereas this does look pretty clear. I know what you're talking about. I see it sometimes when the framing is wide and something goes by in the corner, you'll see it taper a certain way. But generally speaking, this is better than anything I've seen.
It is. It's a beautiful piece of glass. I mean, I've looked through it, as I know you have. And the thing is that the directors, being directors, were complaining they couldn't get close-ups with actors. They wanted some way of making close-ups and medium shots, and they couldn't do it with this lens. And so that's when AO and Dr. O'Brien built these lenses. And it started with Bosch and Lomb, and then it went to Hasselblad and Mamiya. There were lots of different manufacturers that they modified their lenses so that they would work with this camera. But in the early part of South Pacific, they were using only this camera, Fearless camera, because it took Mitchell 2 years to build the BFC.
BFC 65.
Yes. And so if you see any behind the scenes photographs, and then you see the BFC afterwards.
But I mean, look, even these two are pretty far apart.
Oh,
I mean, size-wise.
Yeah.
But look at this though. I mean, look at how you go. Look at how you go from this to this to this, and yet you're still covering.
Yes.
That's remarkable.
And that's how far the optics had come in a very short period of time.
All right, man. Well, hopefully we've entertained you a little bit, gave you a little more information.
We beat the shit out of that.
Yeah, right. We've covered the difficult subjects.